One of you guys gave a really good impersonation
Go
there.
Zach.
I like
Yeah,
to do a
spot on.
jank impression every once in a while.
Of course. So yeah, you guys had Noam Chomsky on recently,
Yeah.
and he said some things that I also disagree with on Forced to Vote, and they gained a lot of traction. A lot of the big shots responded to you guys. So I want to ask you guys, what are your thoughts on his comments on Forced to Vote? And then when I cut this clip out, I'm gonna share the clip of what he said for people who don't know.
One of the more fracturing and extremely divisive debates in recent memory occurred over this idea called force the vote, which sought to pressure progressive congresspeople into using their leverage to essentially threaten Speaker Pelosi's reelection, and as a result, potentially get some policy concessions or at very least a floor vote on Medicare for all. If you paid attention at all to this debate, did you have an opinion on the strategy? And do you think that elected progressives, uh, congresspeople like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Ro Khanna, who believe in policies like Medicare for all and a Green New Deal, have a responsibility to be fighting to push President Joe Biden and his administration even harder by using their leverage in instances like this, or to hold up key bills in order to get policy concessions?
Let's take a look at the real world, not a dream world, the world we live in. Suppose you manage to push Pelosi to say, let's have a vote on Medicare for all. And in the Senate, push Schumer to have it. We know exactly what's going to happen. 50 Republicans will vote against it. A large number of Democrats will vote against it. Two, certainly. Manchin and Sinema, probably plenty of others. So what we're saying is, let's do something to be defeated. Is that a strategy? I mean, it's nice to say, I want this, but we're not children.
But yeah, go ahead and share your thoughts on what you think about what he said about Forced to Vote.
Yeah, I mean, go. What did you say? You wanted to go first?
No, I was going to say, did you want to go first?
I bet. Perfect. Well, yeah, I guess obviously it was a bummer, right? I mean, it was, we were obviously, Gavin and I were stoked to speak to Noam Chomsky. He's a person that intellectually has influenced the entire left broadly, especially, including me and Gavin, obviously. I've listened to countless Noam Chomsky lectures. So, I was incredibly excited to speak to the guy. It didn't seem like he was super impressed with us based off of the way that he treated that answer. It was definitely very condescending to the idea of force the vote. It was he basically belittled the whole thing and compared it to like children seeking candy and not fucking, people trying desperately to fight for healthcare to save people's lives. I completely dismissed it. It is what it is, right? Like, he's allowed to disagree with us, like whatever. We didn't have him on to have a debate, we just had him on to have a conversation, so we were like, all right, this is your fucking take, I guess. But yeah, obviously we disagreed, and it got cut out of the clip, but Gavin, I thought, did a good job respectfully pushing back on a 92-year-old who gets a little crotchety when you don't just accept what the fuck he says.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also, to me, the sense that I got from Chomsky when I asked him about this was that to what extent he did understand force the vote, he had only heard someone's take who was against force the vote. So like he'd heard someone, maybe read like an article about it or something, like, just trying to dismantle the logic. And he was coming at it from that. And he hadn't really heard, someone make the case affirmatively for it or explain why it was a good idea. That wouldn't really be excusable as a, leading leftist intellectual if you weren't 92. And I do feel like he probably doesn't have the same access or media diet that we do. He probably, is still reading more of the establishment or legacy news. So I just feel like he's probably not plugged into the conversation enough to even have really had that nuance of an opinion on it. So, in that sense, I'm just like, it is what it is. I asked for his opinion. I was genuinely interested in his opinion. His opinion was not my opinion. And I wish I had longer, or I wish we had had longer with him so that I could have adequately, educated him or tried to explain it. As it was, we had a bunch of questions we had to move on to. We only had 30 minutes with the guy that we already went 10 minutes over. But needless to say, it was disappointing for certain. And especially for someone who's, considers himself an anarcho-syndicalist at one point. I don't know if he still does. I will say it was somewhat shocking to the extent displayed, not just in that answer, but in every answer in the interview, the extent to which he was just relying on the institutions to carry us forward, when it is very clearly the institutions which have failed us up until this point. I thought another answer that really underscored that was when I asked him about climate change, essentially asking him, what do you say to people that don't think that the sunrise movement goes far enough? What do you say to people that think we need to completely reject, corporate, industrial, multinational capitalism in order to save this environment? And he was basically just like, we don't have very much time left. We gotta work within the institutions. We gotta trust the institutions in order to have a shot at that. To which my response, internally at least, was, what do you mean? The lack of time is why we can't trust the institutions. The lack of time, is why we have to treat this as an issue that is literally existential, not an issue that can be dealt with through institutional, channels. Same with Medicare. Obviously, I mean, it's a crisis for thousands and thousands of people in this country that don't have insurance. Obviously, not everyone has Noam Chomsky's healthcare plan, and if he didn't have a healthcare plan as good as he had, he probably wouldn't still be alive to this day.
We know it's just like policing. Piecemeal reform is unacceptable at this point, at this level, that we've reached. Same with healthcare, same with the environment. We've reached a tipping point, right? We should have reached it long fucking ago. But the fact of the matter is that we're here, and like Evan said, it was very jarring to hear somebody who spent their entire career criticizing institutions, but like basically belittling us because we were challenging institutions. We asked him about Substack, and I was like, do you think this is a good way to pierce the narrative bubble, get through the manufacturing of consent, everybody operating as an independent journalist that's only, beholden to their readers? And he basically dismissed it by saying the fact that like no real reporting gets done on Substack, only commentary, which again, we didn't really have time to fillet it out with the guy. We just kind of had to accept his answers on a lot of shit because we were extremely rushed, and every time he gives an answer, it's like fucking 10 minutes. But
literally,
and I tried to give examples of people like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald who do original reporting, but he was talking, he would give me the like straw man of like, oh, well, they don't have fucking people on the ground in Beirut. They don't have people on the ground in, some wherever in Syria when shit's happening. And, he was like, and that's just like me too. So we're all relying on the same system. So therefore Substack doesn't change anything. It just felt like a little bit of a straw man and very dismissive. So kind of summed up our whole conversation with the guy, to be honest. I wasn't like thrilled about it the more I think about it.
Great takes from both of you guys. And I agree with you guys. Those Noam Chomsky interviews are pretty much just, since he gives those long answers and he gives a limited amount of time, it's really just like, so you can ask, listen, and then just break down afterward. And that's what people did. People gave their takes about why they think he's wrong. Obviously, the Sam Cedar side of the left are going to give their takes on why he's right and be like, yeah, see, Chomsky agrees with us, so we're right because Chomsky's God, like his word is gospel. Get out of here.
And also the other bad faith thing that came from that, and I mean, it doesn't really bother me. Of course, they're going to fucking try and make us look bad. But neither of Gavin and I, like, were out being like, Noam Chomsky's a fucking shill. Noam Chomsky's not serious. We were both very respectful of the guy. You
guys were very
his
respectful.
Contribution to the left is immense. Like, we have to give him the, respect that he deserves. He's 92 years old. Like, he's not at the sharpest that he's been in his fucking life. Okay. We disagreed with the guy on it. It doesn't mean like we hated it. And so it was irritating to see people like Emma Vigilant or whatever, however their last name, be like Noam Shill Chomsky, as if we were trying to like smear Noam Chomsky on our podcast when we were, as Gavin pointed out, like nothing but like extremely polite and courteous to the guy, with the exception of the fact that we did take 15 more minutes of his time than we asked for.
To be frank, he's out of touch.
It felt a little bit like that.
Yeah, the guy thinks that we needed to vote for Joe Biden, like an imperialist, as opposed to taking more public action and informing people about how this like we can't keep getting stuck in this cycle of having to choose between the lesser of two imperialists. And he just doesn't feel the urgency. Like, right, we can't rely on these institutions that are oppressing us to save us. We're running out of time with not just climate change, but the doomsday clock is getting closer and closer to midnight, and we might reach nuclear catastrophe soon. And we just don't have time to keep voting for like the next AOCs or the next squad members, only for them to sell out. Nina Turner's out here telling us that she's going to disappoint us and expect to see her disappointing us. We it's time now more than ever for us to realize that our energy should be focused a lot more on public organizing than we've ever done before.
Yeah, and can I interject real quick on to add to that point, which is that if you believe like Noam Chomsky does, and he said in that interview, that the Republican Party is a radical, insurgent faction of extremist, authoritarian fascists, which I agree with. If you believe that, then voting fucking Democrat to stop it is not a good solution. You know why? Because every fucking 8 years that ends up giving the Republicans power again. Every fucking 8 years, the fucking pendulum swings back and forth almost without fail. So as long as we're in a two-party system,
54 this time around, depending on how it goes.
And sometimes 4, exactly. So as long as we have a system in which that pendulum is going to swing back and forth, sorry, but 1 step forward, 2 step backwards, motherfucker. That's how it's going to be for the rest of fucking time on issues like the environment or whatever issues that you think the Democrats are better than the Republicans which they are better on some issues, not all issues. But, climate change is one where it's like, yeah, obviously, the Republican Party is just completely except for some of them. Like,
yeah, but you're driving off a cliff at a slower speed. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's like, I don't care if I drive off a cliff at 60 or 55. You know what I mean?
And especially if they're not actually offering anything that's a serious, tangible, palpable alternative, because with the PR of the Republican Party, they're just going to convince everyone that yada, 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 and that they're just as good. So the Democrats need to, institute serious social reforms. They actually need to stop and mitigate climate change instead of just tinkering around the edges and handing power back off to the GOP every 4 to 8 years, ensuring the hastening of our fucking destruction, essentially.
And it's by design. Like, both parties are controlled opposition. It's by design for things to get worse with one party. It doesn't matter if it's the Democrats or the Republicans. Like, we get into more wars. The corporations get more powerful, and then they fund more politicians. Our election integrity system is shit. So it makes it more and more impossible to work within the system to overthrow these people that are oppressing us.
It's the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Nationals, right? It's essentially fake opposition